Oh, hello there. I was just reading some of my old favorites. So this past weekend, Logan came out, and finally, on the 9th try, 20th Century Fox managed to make a great movie with Wolverine in it. And it got me thinking about other comic book properties they own the rights to, in particular, the one that they just have not been able to figure out at all, the Fantastic Four. Right now we're living in this crazy time where there are comic book adaptations out on movies and TV all the time. Like already this year, we've had Lego Batman, Legion, and Logan, all three of which are really good. And it drives me kind of nuts that of all the Marvel adaptations there have been, we still don't have a halfway decent Fantastic Four movie because the Fantastic Four are arguably the most important Marvel characters there are. So brief history lesson for you non-comic book nerds. Back in 1961, before Spider-Man or the X-Men or the Avengers, Marvel was not publishing superhero comics. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had this brilliant idea to create new superheroes, but to set them apart from the counterparts at DC, they would give them personalities and relatable problems and make them human beings. That seems obvious now, but at the time it was revolutionary. And this was so successful that it basically set the model for all of the stuff Marvel did afterwards. So there would be no Marvel Comics as we know it if it weren't for the Fantastic Four. There would be no Marvel Cinematic Universe if it weren't for the Fantastic Four. And so this is why it's such a bummer that in this day when we've got a good Ant-Man movie, we still don't have a good Fantastic Four movie. And I don't think it's that hard. Obviously, making any movie is a challenge, but this is not a profoundly difficult thing to adapt. This is not Watchmen. And after the most recent Fantastic Four movie came out in 2015 was a spectacular critical and commercial failure, all these articles popped up being like, do the Fantastic Four just not work on film? Or is it impossible to make a good Fantastic Four movie? Which is ridiculous. Of course it's not. A lot of people make the argument that The Incredibles is the great Fantastic Four movie. And it's an argument that makes sense because it's the same general concept and tone and it works brilliantly. So why wouldn't the actual thing work brilliantly as well? So this past week, I went back and watched all 3 Fantastic Four movies that came out in the past 12 years. I left out the one from '94 because, I mean, it was never even officially released, so let's not count that. It's wrong. So the 3 movies that 20th Century Fox made, they're all bad in different ways, and they all miss some fundamental things about what makes the Fantastic Four work. So just in case some Fox executives are cruising through YouTube and stumble across this video, I'm gonna give you what I think are the 4 key lessons to remember if you wanna make a good Fantastic Four movie. Here we go. Lesson 1, skip the origin. There's this common idea that people are sick of origin stories in movies, which is kind of true, although Doctor Strange did an origin story and worked just fine. But that's not why I'm saying this here. The thing is, the Fantastic Four might have the least important origin story of any superheroes. A lot of characters like Spider-Man or Batman, they'll have this key event in their origin, you know, like Bruce Wayne's parents getting murdered or Uncle Ben being murdered, that define them as people and radically change their outlook on the world. They learn a lesson from it, and that sets them on their path to fighting crime and saving the world. But the Fantastic Four don't really have that. See, before they got superpowers, they were adventurous scientists who stole a prototype spaceship to go up into space where they were then bombarded by cosmic rays. So they were already doing big, exciting, adventurous, exploratory stuff before they got superpowers. And then after they got superpowers, they kept doing the same thing, just on a larger scale, because now they have the abilities with which to, you know, defend the planet. So they're basically the same people before and after they get powers. There's not much of a character arc there. So why do 2 of the movies made in the past 12 years tell this same story? So if I were making this movie, here's how I would do it. Early on in the movie, you would introduce the Baxter Building, which is the big building in Manhattan where the Fantastic Four live and work, and because they are famous public figures, it's a tourist attraction. And so you'd show a tour group walking through the lobby, and on one of the screens there, you'd have one of those videos that plays on a loop, and it's telling the origin of the Fantastic Four, how they went into space and were bombarded by cosmic rays and gained amazing powers, and you'd have the tour group members like looking up and taking pictures and going, oh, and there you go. In the span of maybe 20 seconds, you have communicated how the Fantastic Four got their powers, who they are, their place in the world, how the world views them, that they are famous. All of this stuff done, and you can move on and tell a real story with the rest of the movie. Lesson 2, get the characters right. Now this seems like a no-brainer because in any movie you want the characters to be good, and these guys, like all the big Marvel superheroes have clearly defined personalities and dynamics between each of them. Because the key thing about the Fantastic Four is that they're a family. Even though they're all adults, they function as a family, and each one has a specific role that they play in there. See, Reed Richards, he is the brilliant, kind of like closed off emotionally, kind of reserved, obsessive, super genius father figure. Sue is the rational, compassionate mother figure that basically is the glue that holds them all together. Johnny Storm and Ben Grimm, they function kind of as brothers, as the children of the group. Johnny is immature and cocky and, you know, attention-seeking, and Ben is gruff and quick-tempered and, you know, kind of sad and sweet inside. In the movies that have been made, the two Tim Story-directed ones, like, kind of generally had the ideas of the characters, but Reed and Sue were totally lacking in personality and were just these bland people. And in the one directed by Josh Trank, they're kind of all friends, although do Ben and Sue ever meet in that movie? That movie has a lot of problems. So if you want the Fantastic Four to work, you've got to get the family right. You have to have the dynamics between all the characters, the way they bicker and have conflicts, but ultimately love each other. The Fantastic Four is basically about a family that goes on adventures. So if you don't get the family right, if they don't feel like a family, it's not gonna work. Lesson 3, hold off on Doctor Doom. It frustrates me to no end that all 3 of the Fantastic Four movies that have been made in the past 12 years have Doctor Doom as the villain, and they have all treated him terribly. Because look, Doctor Doom is probably the greatest comic book supervillain of all time. And yeah, like, I like the Joker and a bunch of others too, but Doom is in his own league. Like, on a totally surface level, he wears this big awesome suit of armor, he lives in a castle where he rules over an Eastern European country, he has an army of robots that look like him called Doombots. He's basically Darth Vader from before Darth Vader came along, and also maybe cooler, probably. And when you dig below the surface, he just gets more interesting. Like, as a child, he grew up in this tribe of Romani people, and then he would turn out to be a science genius and went to the US and went to college where he met Reed Richards, but didn't like him, and then there was this accident where he got scarred, he blamed Reed for it, and he like fled back to Europe and became Doctor Doom and just took over his home country. There's this common idea about the greatest villains being the ones who believe themselves to be the hero. And there's no better example of this than Doctor Doom. See, Doctor Doom truly believes the world will be better if he rules it. He's as smart as Reed Richards, so he's a super genius, but he's driven by ego and a need to control things. And look, he rules a country already, and he's pretty good at it. Yeah, I mean, he rules with an iron fist, but his people don't hate him. It's like a functioning country. And there are stories like the recent Secret Wars by Jonathan Hickman and Asad Ribic, where Doom actually does rule the world after becoming a god. And he's, again, not bad at it. It's like a functioning world. So Doom is this fascinating figure where he's this genius who lusts for power, but who also might have a point. And this is why it's so disappointing if you look at how he's been handled on screen. In the 2 Tim Story movies, he was basically just Norman Osborn. He was an evil guy who owned a company and then got superpowers and started murdering the people on his board who wanted to fire him. And in the Josh Trank one, he only shows up as Doctor Doom in the last 20 minutes, but he wants to destroy the world because he loves his new interdimensional rock planet better. I don't get it. So if you're making a Fantastic Four movie, here's how I think you should handle Doom. Don't make him the villain in the first movie. Just have him, like, be a background player. Have him pop up in a couple scenes because he is a world figure, he's a part of their lives, but he's not the main guy. So have him just be a presence. And then, in the second movie, since he's already been developed, the groundwork has been laid, then you can tell your big, epic Doctor Doom story. Finally, lesson 4. Make it big. The elevator pitch for the Fantastic Four is basically a family that goes on big, crazy sci-fi adventures. They're not even technically superheroes, they're more like explorers. In most of the great Fantastic Four comics, they're constantly going to amazing new places, like other planets or other dimensions, or even through time. The whole thing is driven by this massive, relentless imagination, which is why it's so frustrating that the movies they've made are so lacking in imagination. In the first one from 2005, they briefly spend a few minutes on the world's most boring space station, and then spend the rest of the movie in New York. In the sequel, they go to London, and then they go to a forest. And in the 2015 version, they spend most of the movie in science labs and military bases, and occasionally go to their super lame version of the Negative Zone, which is just a big, barren rock planet. So this is just ignoring a big part of what makes the Fantastic Four special, that they're explorers and adventurers who are seeking out amazing new sights and saving the world with, huge new sci-fi ideas. There's a great story arc from John Byrne's run in the 80s where the whole family goes on a road trip through the negative zone, and each issue brings a whole new world to explore. Obviously, a big difference between movies and comics is that comics don't really have to worry about budget. It doesn't cost anything to draw a crazy alien planet. So I realize that when I say make it big, that also kind of means make it super expensive. But remember, these days you can do anything with visual effects. So if you're going to make a Fantastic Four movie, I think it's worth spending the extra money to get some amazing spectacle. Just embrace the big out there sci-fi stuff. Like, I think a major factor that contributed to the success of Guardians of the Galaxy was that James Gunn just steered into the weird stuff and put it all up there on screen. And Fantastic Four needs to do the same thing. It doesn't really work as like a small-scale superhero movie or a grounded, gritty, dark sci-fi thing. It's gotta be big and colorful and crazy. Honestly, think Star Wars in terms of the amount of new worlds and new creatures and visuals that the movie needs to deliver. Now, I have no idea what's actually happening behind the scenes of Fox with the Fantastic Four property. Maybe nothing. But I hope that they don't think people didn't like those movies because the characters aren't appealing. The characters are super appealing, it's just that those movies missed what is appealing about them. For nerds like me, this is a ridiculous time to be alive. Like, in movies and TV, we're constantly getting faithful, quality adaptations of the stuff that we've always loved that we never dreamed would happen. Like, I still am amazed that there is a faithful, good Doctor Strange movie. So look, I will be the first to admit that we're totally spoiled, and I don't want to seem greedy by demanding a good Fantastic Four movie when we've already got quality adaptations of basically every other Marvel or DC character. But look, unless people suddenly stop going to see comic book movies, which is probably not going to happen anytime soon, eventually we're going to get another Fantastic Four movie. It's going to happen. And I really hope that when it does, the people making it take into account these lessons, are just aware of them on their own, because this could be a great movie. It could be really, really good, and I hope I get to see it. And that's all I have to say on the matter. So if you watch this and were like, you know, I've never read a Fantastic Four comic, well, you should, because there's a lot of great ones. Most of the really good ones were done in long runs by single writer or artist teams. Like, there's the classic Stan Lee and Jack Kirby run, which is great. There is the one that I grew up with in the early 2000s, the Mark Waid and Mike Wieringo run, which is fantastic. There's the really excellent John Byrne run from the 80s, and more recently, there is the Jonathan Hickman run from, like, I think it ended like a few years ago. Anyway, those are all on Amazon and at your local comic book store and your local bookstore, and so comic books are great, and I think you should go read them. Anyway, the outro. So if you like what we're doing and you want to help us make these videos, you should check out our Patreon. If you want to yell at me about things or get updates on what we're working on, check out the social media links, and I will be back here with the team and a new video next Wednesday.